Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life. On today's podcast, I have Chris and Jasmine, co-parents of a blended family in Australia, who shared with me in such truthfulness, honesty, and self-reflection about their co-parenting journey. I truly loved this conversation, especially their deep reflections on just how hard it can be. I think so many of you are going to see yourselves reflected. I did want to tell you that about 3/4 of the way through the conversation, Chris got called away to take care of one of their kiddos who woke up from sleep and needed to be put back to bed. And so Jasmine carried the end of the conversation alone and did a beautiful job answering some of the questions that I had for the two of them. Enjoy this rich and insightful conversation with Chris and Jasmine. Welcome to the podcast, Chris and Jasmine. I'm so glad that y'all are here to share your story and to really bring the richness and the complexity of being a blended family, of being a step parent, and of welcoming a step parent into your family. I'm really glad to talk about low demand in the particular context of a family dynamic. So thanks for being willing to share your story.
Absolutely.
So you have lived through a big blended family crisis, as you named it, and it became a turning point for each of you toward a different kind of parenting. So can you bring us back to that season? What was happening then? What did it feel like? And when did you begin to get your footing?
Would you like me to start?
I'll just give a little background. Before all that happened, we had been together for 5 years. 5 years at least.
5 years.
We were, I'd say, a very typical Australian family, peaceful co-parenting, 50-50, both houses. It felt so good and stable that we decided to add 2 more kids to the mix. And the crisis hit when my second baby was 3 months old. So just the context of we had been in a stable, happy, and his son, my stepson, had been going to public school for 5 years, and we just existed in that paradigm of that's what you do. You go to school and you've got to keep up with the schoolwork. It's all we knew. Okay, now you can talk about what happened next.
Yeah, so as Jazz said, we were, to give a little bit even more context, when my son was 3 was when I split with his mum. And then it was when he was 5 is when I met Jasmine. And so, yeah, we had obviously had a long kind of context before our crisis. And yeah, I guess I would say that those early years, I was pretty much just parenting in the very typical way I was parented, which is very authoritarian. Like always, he struggled at school, for example. And so our way of supporting him there was that we always did things at home to try and help him catch up and keep pace with where he's meant to be. But then as he progressed, it started to get a little bit harder and he started to struggle a bit more. And there was definitely a tipping point in my relationship with him where it was like, now you're being lazy, now you got a bad attitude kind of thing. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is struggles he was having at his mum's house specifically. And we had concerns, long-running concerns that was leading up to this thing. And then, yeah, like one week he came back to our house and told us he tried to hurt himself at his mum's house. Never had any signs of this before. We weren't informed of the incident, so it was very like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like the starting point, I guess. Not the start, but the starting point of us going, right, what do we need to do here to protect him, keep him safe? And I guess a lot of blended families is probably a similar story in there in terms of custody, lawyers, expensive court battles and whatnot. It's high pressure, high stress, and you're always conscious of the child in the middle, what it's costing him as well.
But what was starting to erupt was the behavioral issues, the aggression. At first, it was just at mom's, but then it was at our house too. And around that time or a bit before, it was raised that let's get him for an autism assessment. But that kind of went nowhere because the behavioral reports from both houses and the school didn't match up.
One of our requirements through mediation was that we were going to both do this sort of parenting course.
The thing we got from there was Dr. Ross Greene's.
One of her like special guests was Dr. Ross Greene, and then we discovered the CPS, and that kind of clicked. Like that made a lot of sense. So we started to bring that Plan C approach to the situation. And I guess just intuitively, what I could recognize at that time, we obviously didn't know anything about PDA at that point. But what I could intuit in that situation was that he was wanting more autonomy. And so we started doing that on our own in our house, which in hindsight is low demand parenting. And so the more we did that, the more, I guess, the relationship repaired between my son and us. And he was able to then start opening up more about what he's struggling with and whatnot. And then just it snowballed from there in terms of rebuilding that trust and connection.
Many families have been through these kind of crises, but what's so distinct about going through it as a blended family, for you, Chris, through divorce, where you're having to navigate this with an ex-partner or through mediation, right? Those dynamics are so important, so significant. They impact everything about how you experienced that particular crisis. And I think that those aspects aren't talked about nearly enough in our community. And so it becomes yet another experience of being unseen. So tell me, Jasmine, as the stepmom who but you're not new to this story. You love this kid. You've been in his life for many years. What is it like for you when crisis hits and you're an intimate part of the experience, but not the biological parent?
Yeah, so this is a very conflict-filled time for me, which has ended up becoming my work, supporting stepmoms who are adding babies to the family, because that itself has its own complexities, like behavioral issues or crisis aside, that own expanding the family has its own complexities, and that all happened when I was having a second baby. So it was amplified for me because it was so shocking as well. And it was a year into trying to find solutions that we discovered PDA on Instagram. And that was the point where I started to hear, oh, so many neurodivergent families, oh, they experience this violence from their children, aggression. Oh, it was a year into it before I understood that this was a common struggle. So before that, the only story in my head, like what I was exposed to in step parenting groups, is that if something like that is happening, it's like run, or that kid is trouble, or their parents are doing something wrong. And so it was building this sense of no one has a solution for me. And I'm in this horrible spot because I don't want aggression towards my younger kids. And so I was caught in this really difficult conflict. At that time, when it was beginning, I happened to find a parenting coach on Instagram who talked a lot about meeting our children's aggression. So it was fortunate that I was able to get some support on that front, and that helped me. And so that kind of helped me realize, oh, I'm struggling with this so much because I have an avoidant relationship with my own anger. So any anger from a child, it's like scary for me. So that helped me with that aspect of it. But at that time, like, we were not aware at all of PDA. And so it was quite quite long, very lonely for me. No
Yeah.
one was able to tell me what to do. Yeah, so it was very difficult.
Sounds so hard. And that
Yeah.
pull to withdraw from him. And I
Yeah.
wonder, even Chris, for you, seeing her pull away from your son, like my kids versus your kid. No one wants to narrate it that way, but the protective
Yeah, it
fear
is.
that it creates that dynamic, and you can't choose because they're all your kids, and so that it
There's
can
a lot we
create.
can say on this topic.
So yeah, bring me in. What's that? What was that time like for you?
Yeah, you named it like that. I don't get to choose. Like these three kids in our case are all my kids. It's not my two kids and my one step kid for me. And so there's this biological loyalty that is undeniable. Like you don't abandon one of your children just because something else in the family dynamic is suddenly incompatible or struggling. And so, like in the blended family context and our relational space, it was really difficult because as she was pulling away, I would experience that of rejection of one of my own. And back then was also experiencing that as rejection of myself. And so, yeah, that was difficult to navigate in our relationship. Yeah, there's a lot of examples like that and stresses like that that have played out in our relationship because of the blended family context and because of the PDA stuff and how the two mix together as well.
Yeah.
Which is why she's got a whole coaching business about helping stepmoms now because it's such a common problem.
I just want to name that. I'm seeing you both, like your shoulders are rubbing and you're smiling and you're talking about the hardest stuff, but you're obviously deeply connected. You've done so much healing. This is something that's safe enough for you to talk about on a podcast because it's part of your story, but it's something that you've worked through. I would really love for you to bring us in. I think so many people are at that present moment. What you just described is there right now. So, what does it look like to go from that to where you're at now, where you have this sense of we and a team? I sense that discovering PDA was a pivot point for you. Information can come in and it doesn't change our lives. You have to do the work to make the change on the inside. So bring us in on that part of the story.
I will. So
Okay.
another element that I think was adding to his sense of loneliness was I kept saying to him, like, this child's being neglected because I come from this high expectation, high intensity, high nurture Malaysian culture, and when I didn't have any other children, that was my parenting style. A lot of play and a lot of connection, but like to me,
A lot of worksheets.
spending unlimited time of screens, that was like unheard of. And to
Mm,
me, that was like neglect.
mm,
And so I would be coming to him with all these concerns. That's neglect. I didn't say that, but it was kind of like this. And he would tell me something like, you're not seeing all the ways that I'm investing in him. All you're seeing is all the things I'm not doing. And
mm.
so there was a period of tension around that. And the first time he allowed my stepson off school for a whole week. And he spent the first time in his entire life, he spent that whole week gaming. On the Friday, I said to him, at some point, you don't have to do it right now, but at some point, you need to hop off the computer and go for a walk. And he got so angry and so aggressive about it. So there was like big conflict point. That was maybe a month after we discovered PDA.
So it sounds like,
Um,
Chris, you were already starting to implement these things, but Jasmine, you didn't understand. It looked to you like he was just letting things
yeah,
go and
yeah. And by that point, I had already taken a step back. And so I wasn't, on one level, I was leaving all the decisions to him. But on another level, I was struggling with that's not right.
Uh-huh.
And then what made it worse was because he was reacting so aggressively and saying things like, don't threaten me, and this is not your house, and things like that, that really activated me as well. And then he
Uh-huh.
comes and tells me, your approach is harming him. And so that was the worst of the worst. But I was able to hear the explanation, and over time, as things got better, with a clear improvement in terms of his ability to regulate, there were less eruptions with the kids. And over time, I was seeing that this approach is really benefiting him. So that was like, I think just time was a big factor. And then in the middle there was like, we went to marriage counseling for 5 months. It wasn't all about the PDA stuff, it was about our relationship.
Yeah. I think that, to go back to your question, like, how do we get from that place to where we are now? And in truth, it's been a lot of work. And I guess one thing that Jazz and I are passionate about is sharing that, because it's pretty tragic to see. You see it in these groups. You see these parents, PDA families splitting up, and I guess we sit there and go, it's going to get so much harder. Do you really want to do that? And we see how difficult it is for any couple, really, regardless of whether they're a neurodivergent family or not, but to heal from the ways that they've trauma bonded, or the shared wounding that they have, or the wounding that's come from the relationship.
I think a big theme, we were fortunate to be in a position at that point because Chris had a good job. This was before he went into autistic burnout. Yeah, we were in a fortunate position to be able to get help from lots of different people. And one of the themes I noticed for myself amidst the various issues, not just the PDA, was I started to connect the dots between my upsets and my childhood, and realizing the room to grow there was in a direction that helped me become less controlling, or less needing things to be a certain way. That was a big element. Yeah, deconditioning from my childhood. And because I grew up like in a thick Christian, I also had to reevaluate what love is. Yeah. And so these were all themes in my journey that are still ongoing themes, but exploring the question of, what does loving my partner or my children look like? And realize, oh, it actually looks quite different to my childhood, even though I grew up in a family that preached love. It's like a big deconstruction, reconstruction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge work, especially
Yeah.
when you add in the Christianity, because then it's got this, it's magnified, because it's not just like love, like God love, like capital L love. And when that's been wrapped in control or power or
Yeah.
patriarchy, then it's really hard. It's so
Yeah.
many layers of deconditioning to do.
And I will say as well, some of the people I sought help from, I felt like their coaching response was like, you gotta love your stepkid. And so it took me a few to find someone who was nuanced enough to hold space for the complexity of my experience, but still unlock the insight and the path forward without coming in as yet another authoritarian, this is the right way to go about things. Took me a while to find myself in that place where I feel understood and supported and able to access more compassion.
So, being at the end of the crisis, or the crisis period is over, and looking back on it, is there something that it shaped you as a stepmom that you're glad that you're able to carry, like something that you see because of what you've lived through that maybe other step parents wouldn't see or haven't seen yet?
we discovered later on that my younger kids are PDA as well. So my Chris and my son, the 6-year-old, went into autistic burnout at the same time. And I think my step parenting experience allowed me to work through my conditioning in a way that prepared me to meet my children's needs more easily. And the parent coach I hired at that time was saying to me, your toddlers, the challenging times are coming, and the work you're doing now is going to help you there. And yeah, it has, which a lot of stepmoms have this regret or tension within them that says, oh, this difficulty over here with this first family. I wish it just, if only it wasn't, my life would be easier with my perfect babies. Because we're at the beginning of your journey and you imagine it will unfold perfectly.
Yeah.
And so I think because of the support I was able to get, I was able to have a perspective shift. We're essentially now fully responsible for my stepson, which is not what I imagined when we got married. So I don't want to minimize the challenges that stepmoms face in that sense.
Yeah.
But what I like to encourage people is that there are gifts in the journey.
You mentioned before that you were able to hold a lot of these things in tension. Like you could hold that Chris was giving you difficult feedback along with the fact that you had a lot of trust with him. You could hold that this was a really hard moment with your stepson alongside the fact that you had years and years of love and bonding together.
Yeah.
How did you hold the stepmom piece inside of your identity? How did you hold the I'm having to parent through a crisis and I'm being blamed for it? How do you hold that part?
I flitted back and forth. Like I was getting all this support, right, that was encouraging me in my mothering role to him. So it's getting a lot of reinforcement there. I wrestle with this so much, right? And also when I support other stepmoms, I'm cautious because it's complex. And so I'm always wrestling with what is the right encouraging thing to say. But also I had come into my step parenting role with the intention and commitment to love him as my own. That was how our family started. So it's not like this is a crisis that is totally not of my making. You know what I mean? We were all co-parenting him with my high expectation style. So I couldn't say that I had no part to play in it. Yeah.
That makes sense. So in some ways, that's how you held it in tension, was like, what is mine here? How can I own my part and take
Yeah.
responsibility for that? And then you can let go of what's not
Yes.
really yours.
Yes, and also he's part of our family. And I could see my hypocrisy because it's the years before, right? The 4 or 5 years before, I had poured myself into helping him with schoolwork or whatever in the mold of parenting that my mom showed me. And that's my idea of this is how I love my stepson, is to support him to do well in school. And then it was like I saw myself, whoa, it's like you're happy to invest in a particular way. And then when there's a challenge, you're like, that? And Jasmine, what's really going on?
So insightful. It's so hard to do in the moment, though. But just asking the question, like, wait, this doesn't add up. Like the person you say you want to be and the way you're acting, they're not the same. And it's sometimes just that reflective moment, that pause, what is going on? That's the ground. That's the ground for self-discovery. And I would really love to hear about how he's come through his own burnout, because I think that's another piece of
Ah,
the experience that so many people have, which is that they pour and pour in to the conflict until they realize there's just
yeah.
not enough left in the tank for themselves. It's often on about a year to year and a half delay after the conflict.
I don't know that Chris really attributes his autistic burnout to the crisis so much, even though that played a part. Actually, we moved to the beach 2 years ago. So that was like towards the end of the crisis. So that was him following his intuition to move out of the hectic, busy city life. And he was really struggling with that. to a more peaceful nature-based environment. And he says it's coming here to a more relaxed environment that helped him unmask and helped him realize, oh, I'm actually really stressed.
Ah.
And so when he realized that, he quit his job. He was in a high stress job for 5 years. So a year and a half ago, we made the bold decision, step of faith. He quit his job, and then it was 3 months in bed. So that was very difficult for him and for me, but for him, because you attach so much self-worth or your identity to your productivity. So there was kind of like a death for him, and he went to work with a trauma specialist, and then he decided to get diagnosed ADHD. He's in this self-authoring kind of frame of mind, and so he's in that exploration, but he's very used to that. That's where he's at.
Gosh, wow. Everything you just said could also have been said about parenting too, right? I had a death there, and
Yeah.
I have to figure out a new way, and that everything I thought I knew,
Yeah.
it doesn't serve me anymore, and I've got to figure this out again. It also could be said about his old marriage. I'm imagining there's a death there, and I want to find another way to be a parent that doesn't involve being partnered to this person. And yeah, I'm really taking away from this conversation the interconnectedness, the way that parenting and partnering and navigating a relationship with an ex and doing your own inner work, just how messy, but also how mutually informing it all
Yeah.
is. It's not messy where it's irrelevant. It's like everything matters. Everything informs everything. That's what I'm taking away from you guys today.
I think we covered a lot of ground.
We really did. I loved
Yeah.
this. Thank you. And send my thanks to Chris. If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives. I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.